So it appears Joe Manchin is continuing to be the devil. All I'm seeing is just horrible shit from this guy. But what's going on now is the infrastructure plan for, I think, $2 trillion over the next 10 years was the Democratic plan. But now Joe Manchin is going to be the blockade in this situation. He's actually going to try to get it lower, and Republicans apparently are going to be able to convince him to do so. Now, there was going to be a decent corporate tax raise that Biden was going to put in place, but obviously Joe Manchin isn't going to support that. There's another story about how Joe Manchin is calling out big banks who are going for zero net carbon emissions by like stopping their projects in terms of oil drilling and stuff like that. And he went off on them like, oh, screw you. It's absolutely bonkers. So Senator Joe Manchin is emerging as the chief obstacle to quick passage of President Biden's $2.25 trillion infrastructure package that Democrats want to move through Congress sooner rather than later. Manchin is ramping up discussions with Republicans about what a scaled-down infrastructure package should look like, and some GOP senators are even optimistic that the moderate Democrat can be persuaded to block efforts to raise the corporate tax rate. That means Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer will likely have to wait for the negotiations to reach some kind of conclusion before moving ahead with the budget reconciliation process, as Manchin is expected to be the critical 50th Democratic vote needed to avoid a GOP filibuster. Senate Republicans proposed a $568 billion infrastructure counteroffer last week. Now, bipartisan talks on a compromise proposal between $600 billion and $1 trillion are just getting started. Manchin wants time for the talks to build momentum. Quote, "For the sake of our country, we have to show we can work in a bipartisan way. I don't know what the rush is. Stay here a little bit, work a little bit." But Democrats are getting nervous about an extended timeline and worry that splitting Biden's infrastructure agenda into 2 or 3 pieces of legislation might mean that a substantial part of it gets left behind. And so this is literally the opposite of what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to get this through in a speedy process, because otherwise the plan that you're putting in place ends up getting diluted. This is what Republicans do. You think Republicans take a long time to get these things through? No, they jam it through really quickly. And so what he's doing here is effectively, even if he was just, oh, what's the rush? Let's wait. That effectively is blocking the legislation alone. And honestly, what I think is probably going to end up happening at this point is, I'm not saying it's 100% going to happen, but I think Manchin is going to stall the process, and that stalling of the process for quote-unquote discussion purposes, I believe is going to lead to, I don't think any infrastructure will probably get passed, because I think that stalling will make it so that Democrats lose interest, and then they just give up altogether. We know Democrats give up pretty easily. But what needs to be said is Biden needs to really start pulling strings on Joe Manchin, and this is where Bernie Sanders' strategy comes into play. And what that means is you really have to start threatening the guy. You have to start putting your foot on his throat and really forcing him to make these decisions. Get all the Democrats to essentially ostracize the guy, go to his state, rally his supporters against him, say, look at this infrastructure bill that he's trying to pull away. This could be jobs for you guys, well-paying jobs for you guys. Those are the kinds of things you can do. And Kamala Harris did it for the coronavirus package, where she went over to West Virginia and gave an interview. So similar strategies should be utilized in this situation, because clearly he's literally the main cog here that's kind of stopping everything, is kind of effectively filibustering everything. And so you have to respond with some pretty serious force and a response. And the only way to do that is to really start going after him. And the lack of doing this is what Barack Obama did too. He failed to really be able to push and force members of his own party to be able to vote in his line. This is something that LBJ, for example, FDR, these are people who excelled in this, and this is a quality you need if you really want to be a progressive, successful president. So, even the more, basic sort of plans are getting filibustered by Joe Manchin.